What's up? Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about some data modeling, specifically the data model that we use for Craftwork. There are some more advanced features that we use for polymorphic associations between things. And I think the way that we've structured things gives us a lot of flexibility to expand to different services and also can be a little bit challenging to pick up at first. So I wanted to just go through our models and our schema and talk a little bit about some of these objects and how they're related. Craftwork is a home services business. We are starting out with paint services and we have lots of different kinds of painting. So we'll do interior painting, exterior painting. We also paint cabinet. We also will do specialty projects where we might paint furniture or I don't know, some sort of things. We don't do cars right now, but you could imagine that one day we might do cars or something. We also at one point did gutter cleaning. And what we want to do is build a data model that will support all of these different types of projects. Each of these different project types might have different attributes that we need from them to like properly describe the project, estimate the project, and then perform the work. For each of these different project types, we are going to want a couple of different things. We're going to want to be able to build an estimate, and when we build the estimate, we want to show like each individual line item on the estimate so that customers are aware of how much they're paying for each part of the project that's being executed. For instance, if we're going to paint the inside of your living room, maybe we'll paint the walls, we'll paint the trim, we'll paint the ceiling, and walls, trim, and ceiling are all different prices depending on the size of the room and some other things. So we want to break that out because as a customer, you might not want to paint the ceiling, or you might not want to paint the walls, you might not want to paint the trim, or you might want all of those painted. And so along with each estimate, we're going to have an estimate item. Each estimate item represents a specific task that is going to be performed as part of a project. And oftentimes when we're working with customers, they'll say, okay, this is what I want done. We'll give them an estimate and they might say, okay, that is great, but how much would it cost if I also painted this bathroom? Or how much would it cost if I did not paint any of the trim? And so oftentimes for projects, we will end up with multiple estimates. So a project can technically have multiple estimates underneath it. Now, as part of building out all of these estimates and the projects, we also want to keep track of what are the different areas that we're painting or the like things that we're going to paint. And an interior area, an exterior area, a cabinet set, a specialty item, a gutter system. These are all the different types of things that we might do work on. So you might call them workables or something. For now, let's just ignore gutter cleaning and just assume that we're only doing painting. And one of the things that you might do is break these down into what is the kind of generalized thing that all of these objects are. And I call that a paintable. What we want to do is build a representation of these paintables. So we have these project types. Now, what is paintable as part of that project? We have an interior area. That might be like a room, right? A room in a house. We might also have an exterior area. This might be like a shed or a deck or the outside of an entire house or a porch, okay? Then we might have a cabinet set. Maybe this is like your whole kitchen cabinet set, or maybe it's just one wall in a kitchen cabinet, or maybe it's just the lowers for your kitchen cabinets. Because sometimes people will say, oh, I want to keep the tops all green and I want to paint the bottoms all blue or whatever. I don't know. People have interesting tastes around their cabinets. And also, like, just for clarity's sake, we'll also add in a specialty item or whatever. So you might also paint a specialty item. So inside of an interior area, we're going to have things like there's going to be some number of doors, some number of windows. There might be some like ceiling height and other things that are related to interior area. This is like specific to inside. Outside, we might have some like number of stories. We're also going to have doors, windows, and then like number stories. So that's like how tall the exterior area is. If we're painting an apartment complex, that might be like 4 stories tall, right? And then you'll need different equipment for these projects depending on the ceiling height or the number of stories. For a cabinet set, we're going to have, again, some number of doors. You'll have some number of drawers. You'll have some number of boxes. Like when you look at a cabinet, sometimes there's 2 doors on it, sometimes there's 1 door on it, but the entire cabinet itself is generally a box, right? And sometimes you want the inside of the cabinet painted if you can see through the door. Otherwise, like usually you want to paint the outside of the box. Specialty item, there's not really any details here because that can be really generic. Okay, so each of these things is a paintable, right? So like all of these can be a paintable. All right. So each location is composed of lots of different paintables. So if we look at like some address that's like 123 Main Street, 123 Main Street in Charlotte, North Carolina might have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, a living room, a garage, and those are all interior areas. It might also have a porch, the outside of the house, the shed, whatever. It might have a kitchen cabinet set. It might have a cabinet set in the bathroom. So this location, so we'll call this thing a location. This location is going to have all of these things, and this isn't really going to change, right? Like what exists at this location is not going to change. No matter what happens with the project, the location is always going to have the same sort of paintables in it. So these bits and pieces, the location and the details about what exists at the location are not going to change based on the project. So these are all fixed. So let's move this stuff out of the way. And yeah, I'm going to draw a box around the location stuff because this, again, is all like independent of what's happening with projects. So every project is tied to exactly one location. Okay. So we have a project, and a project is related to a location, and it will have a location ID. Now, location is going to have a bunch of other stuff. It'll have the address and maybe some listing details. There's going to be photos of the location. There'll be photos of each interior, exterior cabinet set, specialty item. Those are all photos of a location. And that's, again, describing like what's there. It's not going to change. Okay. Projects are going to have multiple estimates. And I'm actually going to pull out estimate item here and put that on its own thing. So a project or an estimate is composed of a project. So an estimate has or belongs to a project. So an estimate has a project ID in the estimates table that points at which project it's for. And inside of the estimate, this is where we're going to like have calculations about how much it's going to cost and a number of other things. But an estimate item is broken down. Let's just make this here, estimate item. So an estimate item, again, is like, what are we actually doing for this project? So are we going to what we call it like the item type? And this is, we're going to paint the walls, or we're going to paint the ceiling, or we're going to paint the trim, and we'll keep it limited to just those for now to keep it simple. The estimate item also references the paintable ID and the paintable type. So this lets us tie the specific line item on an estimate back to a paintable for a location. So here we're going to have this paintable ID and type. Like these are a composite key that represents one of these paintables. Okay. An estimate item is going to say paint the walls on the exterior area. So like on the shed, or paint the ceiling on the kitchen. An estimate item is part of an estimate. And again, like this has the estimate item will have the estimate ID that this estimate item is for. This allows us to create as many estimate items as we want in order to present different scopes of work to the customer for a single project. There's going to be multiple estimates for a project, And then once an estimate is approved, we'll go and actually do the work for all of those paintables. Now, what this actually looks like in the database schema, let's start with project, just so we can get an idea. So there's like lots of detail about the project. So as part of the project, we're also tracking a lot of like sales statuses and commenting and project tracking and like customer preferences, things like that. So there are a lot of columns here that are for that, but we denormalize the balance and the potential revenue and the actual revenue. So these are all like financial numbers about a project. And then you'll notice that like the project itself belongs to a location. So that gives us the project has a location ID, so it belongs to a location. There's a couple other things here, like which account is this project for? You might have like some of our customers are, like most of our customers are individual homeowners, right? And so we'll have a single account with a single user. So a user has like the name, email, password, phone number, contact information, avatar, things like that. And then a user belongs to an account. So an account can have many users. The idea here is that if you want to have your partner on your account, you can have anyone who's in the house can be on that account. It also works great when maybe you're working with a contractor who has some associates that help organize or facilitate operations for the account. So a single account represents like a customer entity that might have multiple people associated with it. So an account represents either the customer with one user and it's like their house and they want to have some project done, or it could be a contractor who is like having lots and lots of different cabinet sets done and lots of different projects. So every time we do a project is tied directly to an account. And this is actually not one-to-one like this. So the way that this is built is we can have an account user, and an account user is a join between account and user. So this is actually this way. So an account user belongs to an account, and an account user also belongs to a user. This makes it so that a individual user can have multiple different accounts, and an account can have multiple different users. So that, for instance, let's say we're working with a contractor and they have a big project at a commercial building, and that project is on that account. We'll call it like Acme Corp, right? Maybe they're the CEO of Acme Corp and they're having a bunch of coffee shops painted. They might work with some operations manager who's also on that account. But that CEO might also want their own house painted. And so they can have a separate account that's like their private account where they coordinate with their spouse to have their own house painted. We'll have one account that is like Acme Corp and one account that is like the CEO's family private account. And each of those will have their own projects. Okay. So this is how like we relate projects back to accounts, projects to locations, and projects to estimates. So you'll notice that a project has many estimates, and then here it has many estimate items through those estimates. This kept thing is using the discard gem and just saying only give us estimates that haven't been discarded yet. Let's go take a look at estimate. I think that's a good next step. An estimate here has some notes that the customer left us, what percentage of a deposit they need to put down, if it was deleted, if there was a discount, whether or not we're enforcing some pricing things, which pricing version to apply, and which project ID is for that estimate. So now we have some more like granular details about a specific estimate. Okay, now if we look further, an estimate has one account through the project. So from our project, we can go back to the account through that project. It also has a location through the project. So from the estimate, we can figure out what location. It has an address. So technically inside of a location, we have an address object, and the address object is where we store the actual address and some other things about this. The relationship between an address and a location is actually polymorphic because there are lots of different addressable things. So we'll look at that in a second. But the address is where we'll keep like the Google Place ID for the address, the city, straight, like state, zip, street, all of those different things. But then so it has a location. It also has many estimate items and it has many invoices. We'll look at that in a second. And then you'll notice here we have this, each estimate has many of all these different paintables. It has many of these different paintables through estimate items. So an estimate, so this is an estimate, it has many paintables through estimate items. So to get to which rooms are we painting for this estimate, we go through the estimate item because the estimate item has reference to, are we doing a room? Are we doing a shed or something? And also what is happening on that shed. And we call distinct here because we might have an estimate that has 3 estimate items for a kitchen. We might say we're going to paint the walls in the kitchen, the ceiling in the kitchen, and the trim in the kitchen. Now the paintable is going to be the same for all of those. So if we did select star from interior area where paintable ID was equal to select paintable ID from estimate item where estimate ID is whatever, then we would end up getting back multiple of this, like multiple rows of the same interior area, multiple results for the same interior area. So by calling distinct here, we get back like one kitchen, one bathroom, if we're only doing like a kitchen and a bathroom, but multiple items in those bathroom and kitchens. And now you'll notice here that like the estimate has many of each of these different things. So technically, I guess we could build some higher level, like single table inheritance type situation where we have a paintable as a table, and then we have all the columns from interior, all the columns from exterior, all the columns from cabinet set, etc. on one single table. And then we build children classes from the paintable using single table inheritance. But instead of doing that, I kept them separate because I wanted to keep this flexible enough that we could expand horizontally to lots of different home services. So if we start to talk about plumbing, we might redo the plumbing in the same interior area, like in the same kitchen that we painted the walls and the doors and the whatever. And later on, if we go back and decide we want to start tracking what is the size of the drainage pipe in the kitchen, we can easily add that to interior area, but that doesn't matter for exterior cabinet set or like any other thing. And the more like horizontally we scale for different services, the more we would have to add to that giant single table, which is going to like slow everything down, make it more complicated, etc. This is how it's organized. You could imagine that eventually interior area like perfectly describes what is in that room. So here I'm in an office and I have one door, one window, and I have 2 cabinet sets here. They each have 3 shelves. They each have 4 drawers and 4 doors, and there's 4 boxes. We also have a wainscoting with a chair rail, a tile floor, tile ceiling. So you could accurately describe exactly what's in that room in order to offer services that are about that room. So this is why we have interior area separate from exterior area, because it's going to be like, okay, now we're describing a porch, which is going to have very different features that are more related to exterior areas. So I'm going to delete this. That's just like the project types. Let's keep going. So now we have each of these interior areas. In Ruby, there's no such thing as like really there is the concept of an abstract class. There's no like proper Ruby primitive for abstract class. So what we do instead is we include modules. And in fact, this type of module, you can think of this as like a bag of methods almost. There's like a feature of Rails which offers this active support concern, which lets us add methods that are both like instance methods and class methods. So it really lets you expand on or write abstract stuff that can be used by multiple classes. So here, each paintable, so interior, exterior, cabinet, whatever, is going to have many attached shots. So this is like for photos. So we have before, during, and after photos. We also, each of these paintables has many estimate items. So each paintable can have many estimate items because we have this estimate item table that refers back to it. And here where we see as paintable, that's because on the estimate item itself, these are related polymorphically through, or so each estimate item belongs to a paintable with a polymorphic association. So Here, an estimate item has a belongs to an estimate. So we have our belongs to estimate because it has the estimate ID. And then it has the belongs to paintable. And when we do a polymorphic association for these, we have two things. We have a composite key. So we have the paintable ID and the paintable type. So in the database, Rails DB console, select star from estimate items. So you'll see that the paintable type is actually interior area, and the paintable ID is going to be 1. So let's make this a little clearer. We'll do like select paintable ID, paintable type, and ID from estimate items. So you can see there's a bunch of interior areas, and then we start to see, oh, here's a cabinet set. And the cabinet set, in this case, the cabinet set's ID is 1955. The cabinet set's ID is 2035. So we have interior areas, exterior areas, cabinet sets. That allows us to reference multiple different object types in other tables through that one thing. You could imagine we could do something like select star from interior areas where ID is whatever, select paintable ID from estimate items where paintable type is equal to interior area. I don't know. Yeah, ID in, whatever. So this gives you all of the interior area association. So you can imagine how this is going to be handled under the hood by the ORM when it's trying to do that select. It's using both the ID of the paintable and the type of the paintable so that we can expand this to be whatever we want. This paintable should probably be like workable or I don't know, like some taskable thing that you can do. So that is how that is related. Now, when we are talking about the images for an estimate or for like individual, these paintables, right? So when we talk about this paintable module, so if we look at interior area again, and this has the paintable module, we can imagine that all of the content of this module is copied and pasted into interior area. So in interior area, when we say has many attached shots, this is part of active storage, where in the database, we're going to have some objects in the database. So let's just create some of those. So we're going to have an active storage attachment, and we'll also have an active storage blob. Okay, so the blob, and all the while, the images, like the actual image or video or PDF or whatever, is actually stored in S3. So maybe we can just make a SS3 thing over here. This is somewhere out in the cloud. Okay, so now our active storage blob is pointing at S3. And it's going to have the key and some other objects that refer to a specific object in S3, which is like the file that's in S3. And active storage blob gives us methods for getting the URL from S3 so that we can download the file and look at it. Now, an active storage attachment has the ID of an active storage blob, and it also has the ID of whatever object that it's pointing at. Anywhere in the database where you see this has many attached or has one attached, that is automatically going to enable support for active storage attachment to polymorphically be able to point at any object in the database. So if we go over here and we say select star from active storage attachments, you can see here we have the name of the object, we have the record type, we have the record ID. So again, record type and record ID are the composite key that allow us to polymorphically associate and like point at any object type in the database. So here we have user with ID 7. So this active storage attachment is for user with ID 7, and it's specifically for the avatar of user with ID 7. And so this is giving us like our arrow that points out. Now in this case, it's pointing at a user object over here. So maybe we'll just, for fun, temporarily we'll draw this. Okay, so we have active storage attachment now polymorphically related to a user, and it's going to look up that user by ID 7. And this avatar thing, this is because if we look at the user model, there is going to be a has one attached avatar. So here we see the name of the attachment for this user with ID 7. Now, blob ID 4 means that we're pointing at blob active storage blob with ID 4. So if we were to look at what is select star from active storage blobs where ID is equal to 4, this gives us back the specific key, the file name, the image content type, and then a bunch of metadata. So this is like the reference that goes like back to Amazon S3 in this case. Now, technically you could use active storage with lots of different storage backing cloud providers, but we happen to use Amazon S3. So this is an image of Suzanne's avatar. And in the database, the blob for this image is number 4. What's cool is this allows us to say, okay, we have Suzanne's avatar, we have some image, and we can create attachments to attach that avatar. Maybe it's for her user, maybe it's for her profile, some other, like a bunch of other things. Let's run this query again so that we can get an example where we are looking at, okay, so here we're looking at interior area shots. Okay, so we have interior area number 211 has an attachment with ID number 150, and it is pointing at blob 173. So this interior area has a picture of it, and so this active storage attachment is pointing at interior area. Why this becomes important is we've built like a generic file attachment controller. So in our API file attachments controller, we pass in the record type and record ID and the name so that we can use one API endpoint to support uploading and attaching files to any object in our system, as long as we know the name of the attachment, like we know should it be called avatar or shots or before or after or whatever, and we know the class name and we know the ID. So we know the class name might be user, the record ID might be 7, the name might be avatar, and then this signed ID comes back when we do direct uploads to S3. So we can get a direct upload URL where we post the actual multi-part whatever data for the image to S3. And what we get in the response is a signed ID. We take that signed ID along with the class, the ID of the object, the attachment name, the signed ID. By calling attach here, we automatically create a new file attachment object that will associate the image that was uploaded or the video or whatever was uploaded with the object that was created. So it's completely agnostic of what type we're attaching to. Okay, so that gives us this active storage stuff. We have interior, exterior cabinet set. Okay, one other thing that I'm not going to cover right now is the concept of a draft estimate. So a draft estimate is like a temporary holding object that is a more rough representation of an estimate. And when a draft estimate is created, that's customers going through the website and they're like, I think I might want to do this. Maybe they'll put in a couple details about their address. Maybe they'll say, this is what I'm looking for. I want to have the inside of my house painted in the kitchen or whatever. So a draft estimate lets us build things in a sort of like higher level way that doesn't involve creating lots and lots of objects. And then when it's submitted, it creates all these different objects and associations so that we can properly represent in a like nice normalized form all of the components that are required for managing the project, executing the project, collecting payment on the project, and then other things down the line like tracking marketing metrics, ROAS, revenue, retention, all these different like customer recurring, referrals, like lots of different stuff. This also enables us to do things like expand beyond one market. So you can imagine that this location, because it's tied to an address, also has a market. So a market might be like the city that it's in. And so a location has one market. What's cool about that is now we can support multiple different markets and we can route work to different crews and teams based on the market. The idea of keeping the location and all of the context about the location separate from the project and the estimates and what's happening like as part of the work that's happening one time. This is what unlocks the ability for us to expand and continue to support the same customers over and over without having to ask them for the same information over and over. I'm sure you've gone to the doctor and they ask you to fill out the same exact form a million times. Didn't I tell you that I'm allergic to this medicine last time I was here? So this is one way that we can start to build up context about these properties without needing to recollect it for every single project. Another thing that's nice about this is that someone might come to us down the road and say, hey, I know that you painted my kitchen. Can you tell us what color you painted it? And so in addition to all these details, we also will keep track of like with the estimate item. Let's actually look at that. So estimate item. So an estimate item has many estimate item paints, and an estimate item paint points at a paint color. We'll say estimate item paint. So an estimate item paint is a join table between paint color and estimate item. So if we look at the estimate item paints here, this belongs to a color sheen product line. So we might say, oh, we're going to paint this agreeable gray, and it might be eggshell, or it might be high gloss, or it might be whatever. So in addition to knowing the specific color that we're painting, we also need to know what sheen we're painting. We also need to know what brand or paint product line. So the paint product line also includes the brand. So for instance, at Sherwin-Williams, they have an emerald, and they also have oh gosh, it's escaping me. They have like lots of different product lines that have different, maybe like quality scores or warranties for how long they should last, or details about when they should be used on different material types and things like that. So we want to keep track of that. And then that refers back to the estimate item. So there's paint color, but there's a bunch of other paint stuff. But for now, we'll just keep track of the paint color, and we'll also keep track of the estimate item paint being pointed at the paint. Now, one question you might ask is like, why don't we just have the estimate item point directly to the color? And that is because sometimes when we paint a wall, we paint it multiple different colors. So look behind me. Right here, we have the walls, and the top is this blue, and the bottom is, I think it's called bright white. I think the top one is called like Batman blue or something. I don't know, some like really cool name. And in fact, it's hard to see with the lighting like this, but there you can see it right there. So like the sheen on the walls is different. So the way that I painted these walls was like the blue part has mountains in a high gloss sheen, and then above that is satin or like flat, so that you can see mountains even though it's all the same color. You get like a little bit of a kind of a detail. So in this case, painting this room, the walls in this room, just the walls, you would have 3 different estimate item paints. You'd have 2 that have the same color that with different sheens, and then you'd have the white that's used on the chair rail and the wainscoting. So that allows us to use, or this estimate item paint join table allows us to specify multiple different paints for a certain wall or whatever. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop today. Hopefully that answers questions. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be evolving this model over time. And yeah, hopefully this continues to support horizontal and vertical expansion. Yep. Cheers.